The White House is never truly quiet, even after the last tour groups are ushered out, after the press pool drifts into night cabs and the West Wing lights go dim behind security glass. The building keeps a soft, secret rhythm, air handlers humming behind plaster older than memory, pipes ticking with the day's heat, the faint shuffle of custodial shoes polishing history 1 square foot at a time. Elias Morel had learned the building's pulse long before anyone learned his name. 45, Navy veteran, 15 years on the facilities crew, mornings in the East Wing, nights on call wherever history cracked and needed mending. The badge on his belt didn't open the Situation Room or the private residence, but it opened enough doors to know that the White House is less a place than a layered story, and some pages had been glued shut. On a Tuesday in late November, a nor'easter dragged its gray sleeve over Washington. Tourists scurried, umbrellas snapped, and the executive mansion shone against the storm like a ship at anchor. Elias was assigned to room 243, a corridor-level office in the East Wing that had been empty for years, used now for overflow storage. Framed photos that no one could agree on, ceremonial pens, a cracked display case from some forgotten initiative. The electrician had flagged a cold spot behind the north wall, drafts where there shouldn't be any. Old houses breathe, the work order joked. Elias didn't smile. He set his tools down, stud finder, inspection mirror, drywall saw, a small pry bar, and slid on his cut gloves. The plaster looked ordinary in the way a painting looks ordinary if you've never studied brushstrokes. He rapped softly. Hollow. Again higher. Hollow. Then a few inches left solid. He measured, marked, measured again. The pattern was wrong. Behind the lath and plaster, there should have been brick or framed void. Instead, his knuckle found a rhythm that felt deliberate. He scored a neat rectangle, eased the saw through, catching dust on a canvas bag. The plaster gave with a sigh. He set the cut panel aside and lifted his flashlight. Empty space, 6 inches deep. And then wood. Not framing lumber, not a stud. A thin panel, hand-planed. The grain oiled to a low sheen long ago. No nails, no screws. Someone had wedged it in place and never meant it to be found. Who put you here? He whispered, because the room seemed to require quiet. He slid the inspection mirror into the gap, angling the light just so. The panel reflected back a dull rectangle, edges beveled. On the lower left corner, a twine loop poked through, knotted from the back. He pinched the loop with his pliers and tugged gently. The panel moved. Dust bellied out like a breath held for decades. Elias pulled the board away and set it on the tarp. Behind it, a shallow cubby revealed a bundle, a long, flat parcel wrapped in brown paper and bound with a ribbon once crimson, now dried to rust. His first thought was practical, chain of custody. He should call the duty officer, log the discovery. Wait, the White House doesn't belong to curiosity. It belongs to procedure. But the storm pressed against the windows. The corridor lights outside flickered. The empty office felt like a bell jar. And the parcel, God help him, felt like it had waited exactly for his hands. He took a photo for the log, time-stamped, and then, with the careful fingers of a man who had folded flags, he untied the ribbon. The paper flaked, brittle as pastry. Inside lay a single envelope, heavy cream stock, the kind they don't make outside of royal weddings. No address on the front. On the back, a seal pressed in wax, cracked but unbroken. The impression was faint yet unmistakable. An eagle, ringed by stars, perched above a motto in Latin. Elias couldn't place it exactly. It wasn't the modern seal. It looked older. He held the envelope up to the light. Something inside, a folded sheet, maybe two, cast a pale silhouette. And in the corner, dark flecks. Red-brown, like the ghost of a fingerprint that time had tried and failed to erase. The radio on his belt crackled. Facilities, Morel, you still in 243? He thumbed transmit. Copy. Found a hidden void behind the north wall. Securing it. Yeah. Do what you gotta do. but keep the dust down. We've got a donor walkthrough at 0800 tomorrow. Roger. He clicked off and stared at the envelope. Be the adult in the room, he told himself. Tag it, bag it, call it in. But his thumb found the brittle wax and felt the hairline fracture already there. If the seal was already broken decades ago and just rehardened, was he really opening it? Or just letting it breathe? He slid a blade under the wax and pried gently. The seal gave with a dry tick. He opened the flap and drew out a sheet of paper that wasn't paper so much as vellum, thick, fibrous ivory. The letter began without preamble in a firm, slanted hand. To the one who finds this, the meeting documented below did not occur. It must not occur because it must never have. But if it did, and if the memory of it can be buried only by evidence of its own existence, then let the burial be complete. Elias exhaled without realizing he'd held his breath. He read on. On the evening of November 21st, at the hour when the staff depart and the city considers sleep, a letter was received by hand, not courier, from the office across the drive. It contained an offer so precise in its menace that no reasonable person could refuse, and so unlawful in its promise that no person bound by oath could accept. Across the drive, the West Wing, menace and promise. The words felt like a wire thrumming between his fingers. I was told to carry my answer not by mail, nor by trusted aid, but by the oldest instrument myself. I was told to bring it to a room without a name, behind a door no one marks, at a time when no clocks are meant to be seen. There, I was told, the Republic would be offered a guarantee, a sudden end to chaos, a uniformed calm. The price was to unmake oversight, once, and then forever. Elias closed his eyes. The building offered up a memory. A tour guide once telling a group that presidents and their advisors used to walk halls at midnight, brokering compromises that never made the morning papers. He opened his eyes and kept reading. I went to the door. I opened it. I found a room. I did not step inside, because standing at the threshold, I heard the future remark upon itself. It sounded like applause, and it sounded like chains. The next paragraph had been underlined twice. Do not trade secrecy for safety. Do not trade oversight for order. If you are reading this, someone will ask you to. Say no. The signature was not there. Instead, a single line. This letter names names on the reverse. Elias flipped the vellum. Names had been written in a smaller, tighter hand. Some were roles, not people. Chief of Staff, designate. Attorney General incoming. Others were initials paired with dates. One name was written fully, and scored out so hard the vellum had almost torn. Under the strike through, in a calmer hand, a note. He will deny the meeting. He will deny the letter. He will deny me. A gust slapped rain against the window. Somewhere in the ductwork, a damper closed with a hollow thunk that made the room feel suddenly smaller. Elias folded the vellum along its original creases, slid it back into the envelope, and then, only then, noticed the second enclosure clinging to the sleeve. A smaller slip, half the size of a postcard. On it, a short cipher, blocks of numbers arranged in pairs, like coordinates without a map. He took photos of everything, hands steady now with the discipline of routine. He rewrapped a bundle in the brown paper and set it in a clean evidence bag from his kit. You didn't work this building long without learning to carry a few things the logbooks never mentioned. He labeled it, Room 243, North Wall Void, 2047 HRS EM. When he stood, he saw movement in the glass of the picture frame leaning against the far wall, just a ripple, like heat above a road. He turned. Nothing. Only the office, the rain, the steady breath of the building. He replaced the panel with blue painter's tape and a discreet note, Do not disturb facilities. He cleaned the dust, rolled his tarp, and took one last look at the void he'd opened. The radio hissed again. Morel, director's office, wants a status on 243. He pressed transmit. Wall anomaly stabilized. Will brief. He killed the light, stepped into the corridor, and locked the door behind him. His footsteps rang soft down the East Wing hall toward a world of procedures, chain of custody forms, domed cameras, men with lapel pins who smiled with their mouths and not their eyes. At the bottom of the stairs to the ground floor corridor, a man waited whom Elias had never seen and yet recognized instantly. The way he wore a suit like a uniform, the way his gaze took in the evidence bag without pretending not to. The lapel pin was a tiny American flag. The smile was careful. "Mr. Morrell?" the man said, as if they'd met. "Thank you for your diligence. I'll take that now." Elias didn't move. "And you are?" "Someone who keeps the building's stories in order," the man said. "And this," he nodded at the bag, "is a story. Best we keep it tidy." Elias felt the damp weight of the storm in his coat, the weight of the letter in the bag, the weight of the building at his back. He thought of the line, underlined twice. "Do not trade secrecy for safety." He tightened his grip. "Chain of custody goes through facilities and the usher's office," he said evenly. "You'll get it after I log it." A pause. The man's smile didn't change, but something behind it did. "Of course," he said. "We appreciate professionalism." He let Elias pass. Footsteps followed, unhurried, patient. At the usher's office, the graveyard duty clerk raised his eyebrows at the sight of the evidence bag, then lowered them again at the sight of the man with the flag pin. Elias completed the form. Room number, time, nature of discovery. Historical document, unknown origin. Custodian's signature, E. Morrell. Recipient, Household Archives, intake. The clerk reached for the bag. The man with the pin placed a hand on the counter, not touching, just there. "Thank you," he said softly. "We'll handle it from here." Elias relinquished the bag, and with it, felt a line cross he hadn't seen on the floor. He kept the smaller slip, the numbered cipher, folded in his pocket. Not a theft, he told himself. A photocopy waiting to happen. A breadcrumb, in case pages went missing. As he stepped back into the corridor, the storm outside faded to a whisper, and the building felt too quiet again. He paused beneath a portrait that had looked down on a century of unrecorded conversations and thought, if a story is dangerous enough to hide in a wall, how do you bury it once you've touched it? His phone vibrated. A text from an unfamiliar number, no name attached. "Do not discuss the letter. Your badge will still work in 243. Check the baseboard behind the radiator." He stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then he looked back down the hall to where the man with the flag pin was walking the other way, not looking back, because men like that never needed to. Elias slipped the phone into his pocket, turned toward room 243, and felt the building, for the first time in 15 years, change its rhythm around him. It sounded, just for a moment, like applause. And it sounded like chains. By the next morning, Washington looked washed clean. Pale sunlight glinting on puddles, wind cutting the flags to ribbons. But inside the White House, nothing was clean. Not the air. Not the silence. Elias Morrell had slept maybe an hour. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that letter again. The handwriting looping like command lines. The words carved into his mind. "Do not trade secrecy for safety." He stood outside the break room, coffee in hand, pretending to read the maintenance schedule on the bulletin board. His phone buzzed again. Same unlisted number as the night before. Delete the photo. You've already been logged. Elias's hand froze halfway to the screen. He looked down the hall. Nobody. Just the soft echo of an early tour guide's voice drifting from the public wing. He deleted nothing. Instead, he slid the smaller paper, the cipher he'd copied from the envelope, from his wallet. The rows of numbers stared back, columns neat and purposeful. 17, 11, 26, 09, 23, 08, 19, 12, 33, 02, 04, 21. At first, he thought dates, but the year markers were wrong. Then coordinates. No, the spacing didn't fit. He tried a simple letter substitution, A equals 1, B equals 2. 17, 11, 26, Q, K, Z. Nothing. But one pattern stood out. Each row ended with a number under 36. Old codes used 36 letters sometimes. Alphabets plus numerals. Military ciphers. He didn't know it yet, but that note would lead him to something the Secret Service never logged. At noon, he was called to Facilities Office B3. Waiting there wasn't his supervisor. It was the man with the flag pin. "Mr. Morrell," he said, smiling politely. "Good to see you're up early." Elias shut the door. "I logged the discovery. I followed procedure." "Oh, you did?" The man tapped a pen against a clipboard. "And we're grateful. You've served this building well. But there's one formality left. We'll need your statement, just a quick recap of what you found. What time? Who you spoke to." Elias hesitated. "I already filled that in." The man's eyes stayed kind but fixed. "Let's do it again. For internal clearance." Elias sat. The chair creaked. He felt watched from behind the mirrored glass that separated the small office from the hall. Describe the object. "A letter. Old. Hidden in a wall cavity." "Describe the contents." Elias paused. He thought of a line. "Say no." Then said simply, "Historical material. Looked like a private correspondence. Pre-modern seal." "Did you read it?" He looked up. "Wouldn't you?" The man smiled again, thinner this time. "Did it mention names?" "Some titles. Illegible." The pen stopped tapping. "Did you take photographs?" Elias lied like a man who wanted to believe it wasn't lying. "No." Silence filled the room, like water filling a glass. Then the man nodded. "Good. That's all we need. You can clock out for the day. You'll receive a temporary badge update by email. Small clearance change. Nothing major." He stood, shook Elias's hand, firm grip, soft voice. "And Mr. Morrell?" "Yeah. Let the past stay buried, all right?" Elias didn't go home. He walked south along East Street, coat collar up, blending into the gray crowd of commuters. By the time he reached McPherson Square, the drizzle had started again. He ducked into a coffee shop and opened his phone. One photo remained, the cipher slip, scanned and uploaded to a private email draft. He zoomed in. The numbers weren't random after all. Each row, when divided into 2 digits, formed letter number pairs, 17/11ths, 26/09, etc. Old government indexes used to store documents by wing, floor, and cabinet code. He cross-referenced the first set against an old White House architectural layout from the Truman Reconstruction era, one he'd memorized back in training. 17/11/26 corresponded roughly to Sublevel 1, East Wing, Storage Corridor C, a stretch of old rooms sealed during renovations in 1952. He almost laughed. No way. But deep down, he knew exactly where the next door would be. That night, he stayed after shift. The flagpin man didn't reappear. No one did. He used his badge, still active, just as promised, to access the service elevator behind the kitchen freight zone. The panel didn't list Sublevel 1, but when he swiped and pressed B, the car shuddered and descended past it anyway. The lights flickered. The air changed, denser, older. When the doors opened, the hallway beyond was nothing like the polished marble above. Bare concrete, rusted pipes, paint the color of stale parchment. At the far end, a metal door, welded at the edges, faintly stamped with 3 letters. SDB. He approached slowly. His flashlight beam caught movement, dust motes or something finer. He touched the metal. It was warm. And then he heard it. A voice through the intercom speaker embedded near the top, low, hoarse, close. "Elias." He froze. "We told you not to open it." Static hissed. "Do not trade secrecy for safety." The same words, the same hand, now whispered through a wall that shouldn't have power. He stepped back, heart hammering. The door's surface trembled faintly, as if something behind it shifted in time with the building's heartbeat. Then came a sound, deep, metallic, rhythmic, like machinery turning far below. He turned off his light and stood in darkness, listening. After 30 seconds, the rhythm stopped. The air fell still. Somewhere above him, a power relay clicked, and every light in the corridor came on at once. The intercom crackled again, softer this time. 3:07. The clock on his watch read 3 hours, 6 minutes, and 12 seconds. He ran, back to the elevator, back to the familiar hum of the living White House, back to the place where history pretended to sleep. At dawn, he stood on the lawn, the sun bleeding over the Potomac. He looked back at the mansion, its windows glowing gold. Somewhere under that glow, behind concrete and politics, a room still breathed. And in his pocket, the copy of the cipher note burned faintly against his thigh, like something that wanted to be found again. By Thursday morning, the letter had already begun to vanish. Not from the archives, not yet, but from the conversation. The usher's office logbook where Elias had entered the find, page removed. The chain of custody form, missing its carbon copy. The duty officer who signed the intake, transferred, according to a voicemail that sounded too rehearsed. The only thing that hadn't disappeared was Elias himself, and he was starting to wish he could join the rest. He sat in his truck, just outside the East Executive Avenue gate, engine off, heat running low. The letter's words replayed in his head like a static loop. Do not trade secrecy for safety. Say no. He will deny me. He thought about the door he'd seen in the sublevel, the welded plate marked SDB, the voice that somehow knew his name. He'd checked every map, every schematic, every access log he could find in the maintenance archives. There was no sublevel 1 corridor C-listed anywhere. The lowest recorded blueprint ended at service level B, and even that was marked restricted since 1974. Someone had built an entire floor of the White House and then erased it. That afternoon, he went to the National Archives Annex in College Park. Old habit from his Navy days. When something didn't make sense, find a paper that wasn't meant to survive. He requested Cold War infrastructure records under the pretense of HVAC retrofits. The archivist, a woman in her 60s with horn-rimmed glasses and the patience of saints, brought out 3 boxes of blueprints and maintenance correspondence dated between 1948 and 1954, the Truman Reconstruction era. For hours he flipped through onion skin paper, the air thick with dust and mildew. And then, on a faded engineering sheet stamped East Wing Substructure, he found it. Tiny handwriting in the corner margin. Temporary Service Access Project. SDB/Classified 1951. Defense Briefing Chamber. Defense Briefing Chamber. SDB. The same letters. He traced the penciled outline. A small annex branching from the main East Foundation, accessible only through a tunnel marked sealed post-completion. There were 2 signatures below. R.C. Abrahams. Structural Engineer W.J. Executive Oversight. The initials meant nothing, until he noticed a third, written faintly in fountain pen. H.T. The same initials from the back of the letter he'd found in the wall. Elias leaned back, heartbeat quickening. He'd found it. The room without a name the writer had described. Buried, sealed, forgotten. Except it wasn't, because he'd seen it, and heard it breathe. That night, he parked near East Executive Avenue again, watching staff cars enter and exit through the gates. His badge had been updated. It still worked, but now every door beeped twice. Once for access, once for logging. He wondered how long before someone realized he was the one asking questions. At 11:57 p.m., he texted the number that had been warning him. You were right. There's a room down there. Seconds later, the reply came. Then you know too much already. Leave it sealed. He typed back. What's inside? No answer. Then, just before midnight, another message appeared. You've already heard it. 3:07. He shut off his phone. Inside the East Wing, the power was lower at night. emergency lights casting everything in sickly gold. The service elevator hummed as it descended, groaning through cables that had seen more presidents than he had years. He brought a small portable scanner this time, an EM tracker used for locating faulty wiring and magnetic interference. It wasn't standard equipment, but then, nothing about this was standard. At the base of the shaft, the air was thicker than before. He passed the same concrete corridor, the same warm metal smell. When he reached the SDB door, he stopped. Someone had cleaned the dust. The floor showed fresh boot prints. And there, etched into the door, shallow but deliberate, were 3 new words scratched into the steel. Who opened it? The letters looked recent. Sharp. He aimed his flashlight down. The weld seams had been cut cleanly and resealed with new bead lines, still dark from the torch. Someone had opened the door and closed it again. He pressed his palm against the metal. Cold this time. He leaned close. No sound. No hum. Then, faintly from deep inside, tick. Mechanical. Rhythmic. Like a heartbeat made of iron. He stepped back, breathing shallow. The tracker in his hand began to pulse, slow. Green blinks turning to rapid orange. It wasn't detecting voltage. It was detecting magnetic fluctuation, like a generator starting to spool. He turned to leave, but the elevator light above him flickered, then went out completely. The emergency bulbs along the corridor glowed red, and behind him, the door exhaled. A low rush of air spilled out around the frame, cold enough to make his breath fog. And in that moment, he swore he heard movement, not footsteps, but something sliding slowly back into place. Then, click, the door locked itself again. He sprinted back to the elevator. When the power finally restored, it jolted like it had been pulled from sleep. When he stepped into the East Wing proper, a Secret Service agent was already waiting near the freight zone. Not his supervisor, not the flagpin man, someone higher. Mr. Morrell, the agent said calmly. You've been busy. Elias froze. I was running a diagnostics check. Diagnostics don't take you 3 levels down. The agent held out a hand. Your badge, please. Elias hesitated. Am I under investigation? The agent smiled. Not yet. That night, Elias didn't go home. He drove west, past the river, into Arlington, checked into a cheap roadside motel under his mother's maiden name. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cipher sheet under the yellow lamplight. He remembered the voice through the door, his name, whispered by something that shouldn't have known him. He wondered what the letter's author had heard on their night in that room, and what happened at 3:07, the time the world seemed to forget. The TV flickered static in the background. He opened his notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of a blank page. Say no. Always. At 3:06 a.m., the motel room's digital clock blinked once, then again, and then, for exactly 60 seconds, the screen froze. 3:07. From the wall vent came a whisper, soft male calm. You shouldn't have gone back. Elias sat motionless. The hum of power lines outside faded. The air smelled faintly of ozone, like the sublevel. And when the minute changed, the voice was gone. But on the table, beside his notebook, lay a folded envelope that hadn't been there before. No address. No seal. Just 4 words written neatly on the front. Read it where it started. Elias didn't sleep that night. He just stared at the envelope on the motel table. The handwriting was identical, the same slanted pen strokes, the same heavy ink as the letter he'd found inside the White House wall. No return address. No fingerprints. Just those 4 words. Read it where it started. He sat motionless, watching the envelope as if it might breathe. When the sun finally rose, it didn't bring comfort, only a pale light that made the world look thinner, more fragile. He packed up the note, grabbed his keys, and drove back toward D.C., his pulse steady in that strange, numb rhythm that comes after fear turns into purpose. He didn't tell anyone, didn't call his supervisor, Didn't answer the block number that buzzed his phone every 20 minutes. He had already decided. He was going back to room 243. It was Saturday morning. Light traffic, calm streets. Security at the east gate didn't blink when his badge scanned green. He walked through the marble corridors like a ghost returning to its own haunting. The building was alive and it's quiet. Cleaners mopping, interns whispering, a press aide tapping at her phone, all oblivious to the fact that somewhere beneath their shoes, history had been folded and sealed like a secret code. He reached room 243. The blue painter's tape he'd left on the wall was gone. The panel he'd replaced had been repainted, patched perfectly, as if his discovery had never happened. But something new caught his eye, a small, square air vent just above the baseboard near the radiator. Newer than the rest of the room. Wrong color metal. He knelt. The vent grill wasn't attached with screws, just a press latch. He popped it open and reached inside. His fingers brushed something cold, metallic, and square. He pulled out a small cassette tape, unmarked except for a number written in fading ink. T0951. His breath caught. The tape felt heavy in his palm, heavier than plastic should. He looked again into the vent. Empty now, but on the inside edge of the metal, scratched into the paint, with 3 letters, SDB. He took the tape to the break room. There was an old stereo in the corner, used for maintenance training sessions. He slid the cassette in. Pressed play. Static. Then a man's voice. Clear, low, deliberate. Date, November 21st. Time, 3:07 a.m. Witness, HD. Elias froze. That date again. The voice continued. The door was open when I arrived. There was light inside, not electric. The air was hot, metallic. The subject was seated in the chair, restrained, but breathing. They said it was a demonstration. I call it something else. The sound of footsteps. Papers rustling. Then another voice, rough, distorted, almost inhuman. You shouldn't record this. I have to, the first voice said. Otherwise they'll rewrite it. A long silence. Then faint mechanical humming, low and rhythmic, like a turbine far away. And then the whisper. Do not trade secrecy for safety. The tape clicked. End of side A. Elias sat motionless, the air around him colder than before. He turned the tape over. Pressed play again. At first, just static. Then, faintly, the sound of someone breathing very close to the microphone, and a voice that was not HT's. Elias. He dropped the player. It clattered onto the floor, ejecting the tape. His name. It had said his name. He rewound it, replayed the last 30 seconds, but the voice was gone. Just static again. He looked at the clock on the wall. 3:07 p.m. He laughed, a short, broken sound. Coincidence, he told himself. Time meant nothing. He gathered the tape, the envelope, the cipher, every piece of the puzzle, and packed them into a manila folder. Then he headed for the archives level, 1 floor below. If the room beneath the east wing was the origin, maybe the archives held its echo. He swiped his badge. Green light. Door unlocked. The corridor smelled of dust and chemicals, climate-controlled decay. He followed the rows of gray cabinets until he found the restricted section, separated by a metal gate. His badge wouldn't scan here, but the keypad still used a manual override, 6 digits, same as an old facility's access code. He typed 173207, the first numbers from the cipher. The gate clicked open. Inside, the air was colder. Boxes labeled 1949 to 1953 reconstruction. He found a folder marked Defense Wing, structural briefings. Inside, blueprints, memos, hand-drawn notes, and a letterhead bearing the same Latin motto as the wax seal. Ordo ex silentio. Order from silence. Below it, typed in faded ink. All operations within substructure D to remain unrecorded. Personnel subject to memorandum ND 307. ND 307. He traced the numbers with his thumb. Always that time. He turned the page, and froze. There was a photo, black and white, taken in a concrete room. 3 men in suits standing behind a chair. A machine behind them, coils, cables, turbine-like core. And in the chair, he squinted. The face was blurred, motion-smeared, but the posture was unmistakable. A man slumped, restrained. Next to the photo, a handwritten note. Subject reanimated for 4 minutes, 7 seconds. Sound recorded. Heartbeat synchronization. Timestamp 3:07 a.m. Elias's stomach turned. He flipped another page, blank. Another blank. Every subsequent page had been removed. And on the folder's inside cover, in faint pencil, "Don't let them turn it on again." He closed the file. Heart pounding. Everything, the letter, the cipher, the door, was connected. Whatever had been inside that SDB chamber in 1951, it wasn't gone. And someone, somewhere, wanted it buried again. He tucked the folder under his arm and headed for the exit. But as he reached the elevator, he saw something that stopped him cold. The flagpin man was standing at the end of the corridor, hands clasped behind his back. "Mr. Morrell," he said quietly, "you've gone further than anyone expected." Elias didn't answer. The man stepped closer. "You've been reading files that don't belong to you, opening rooms that aren't supposed to exist." Elias tightened his grip on the folder. "Then why do I still have clearance?" The man smiled. "Because we needed to know if it was still active." Elias whispered. "The room," the man said. "The sound. The experiment." He paused, then added softly, "You woke it up." Elias took a step back. "What do you mean, woke it up?" The lights flickered. A low hum rolled through the floor, faint at first, then rising. Metal vibrating, steady, rhythmic. Thump, thump, thump. The same pulse he'd heard behind the SDB door. The man's voice was almost reverent now. It was silent for 70 years. Elias whispered, "What happens at 3:07? The man's smile faded. "That's when it listens." For the rest of that night, Elias Morrell didn't feel like a man anymore. He felt like a thread, and someone somewhere was pulling it. The hum from below followed him everywhere, even outside the White House walls. He could still feel it. Faint vibration in the soles of his boots, like a heartbeat buried under the city. He sat in his truck, gripping the folder against his chest, the flagpin man's words replaying again and again. "You woke it up. That's when it listens. It listens." The phrase echoed, metallic and alive. He looked toward the White House, glowing ivory against the dawn. Beneath all that beauty, there was something humming, something that wasn't meant to, and he had touched it. At 9 a.m., he called the only person he still trusted, Claire Danner, an archivist he'd known for years. Quiet, sharp, one of the few who didn't flinch when the word classified came up in conversation. They met at a park bench across from the ellipse. Claire wore her badge turned inward. "You look like hell," she said. Elias handed her the folder, the cipher, the photo, the blueprints. "It's real, Claire. There's a room under the east wing they erased, and it's not empty." She flipped through the pages. "You know what this is?" "Not yet." She tapped a line that said in D, 3:07. "That's not a room number. It's a protocol. Neural defense, 307. Cold War experiment. Supposedly abandoned." Elias frowned. "Neural?" Claire nodded. "They were trying to synchronize human neural activity with long-range power oscillations. The theory was that if you could match electrical resonance with human brainwaves, you could influence decision-making. They called it stability conditioning. Mind control. Influence, she corrected softly. But it failed. Or maybe it didn't. Hard to tell when everyone involved disappeared. Elias stared at the river beyond the fence. What did they use as a power source? Claire hesitated. "That's the part no one ever wrote down." He looked at her. "But you know." She nodded once. "The entire East Wing grid. The turbines beneath the old substructure. They built a containment generator down there to run continuously, but only at specific cycles. Every test logged a synchronized pulse at exactly. She stopped. Elias finished for her. 3:07 a.m. By nightfall, he made up his mind. He was going back, one last time. He told Claire to leave the documents with a reporter if he didn't return by morning. Then he drove through the rain to the east wing, flashed his still-active badge at a distracted night guard, and disappeared inside. The corridors were quiet, hollow, almost expectant. He rode the service elevator down again. The hum already stronger, not imagined this time, but real, vibrating through the walls. The doors opened to red emergency lights. The SDB door stood ajar. He stepped closer, the air sharp with ozone. Inside, the room pulsed with faint orange light. The turbine was alive again, spinning slowly, like the world's oldest heart. Cables looped from the ceiling into the floor, vanishing into shadow. And at the center, strapped to a steel chair, sat something human-shaped, but still. Elias stepped closer. It wasn't a corpse. It wasn't alive either. Its skin looked like aged paper over metal veins, the jaw wired shut, eyes open and glassy, staring through him. Every few seconds, a small vibration ran through its chest, a residual spark. Pinned to its sleeve was an old ID tag, HT, the man who wrote the letter. Elias circled the chair, trembling. On the wall behind it, faint writing in chalk. Do not let it stop. He touched the control panel, rusted, fused, but still active. A faint hum, steady, rhythmic, pulsing with power from somewhere above. Each beat matched his heart. He reached for the switch marked main relay. Behind him, the intercom hissed. The same voice as before. Elias. He froze. It's listening. The turbine spun faster. The lights flickered, then steadied. He could feel pressure building, like sound just below hearing. You brought the power back, the voice said, almost tender. Now we can finish what we started. Elias shouted, What are you? Memory, it whispered, the part they tried to erase. The hum became unbearable. He covered his ears, but the sound was inside his skull now, a resonance that made his vision pulse with each beat. He stumbled toward the main panel. The words from the letter burned through his thoughts. Do not trade secrecy for safety. Say no. He grabbed the lever and pulled. Sparks erupted. The lights went white, blinding. The hum broke into static. Then silence. When the power came back, it was dawn. The turbines were still. The chair was empty. No body. No HD. Only the letter, folded neatly on the floor beside his feet. He picked it up. It wasn't the same one from the wall. The ink was fresh. Elias, you heard it too. The sound wasn't power. It was us. Every secret kept alive by silence has a pulse. You didn't stop it. You just made it wait. HD. He looked around the chamber. The hum was gone. The air still. He climbed the stairs back to the surface, feeling the weight of that silence follow him. At the east wing entrance, a maintenance worker stopped him. Everything okay down there? The man asked. Elias forced a smile. Yeah, just a noise issue. Fixed now. The worker nodded and walked off. And as he did, Elias noticed the small flag pin on his lapel. That night, the story of Elias Morel ended quietly. He didn't return to work. His apartment was found empty, tools packed, wallet on the counter. The only thing missing was his badge. Weeks later, a new work order appeared in the East Wing logs. Room 243. Wall anomaly resolved. Seal reinforced. No further action required. But every night, when the building goes dark and the clocks cross 3:07, the security cameras in the sublevels flicker just once. And in the static, if you slow it down frame by frame, there's a reflection in the turbine glass. A man in a maintenance uniform, standing still, listening. It sounds like machinery. It sounds like a heartbeat. And it sounds faintly like applause.